All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Everything Combat, because life, of course, is a fight. And, man, we got a very, very special guest today, very, very special episode. If you've been following us on social media, we made a pretty big announcement as to some pretty big moves with our media/production company. We're going to get all into it, but joining me, as always, UFC Hall of Famer, trainer of champions, eater of worlds, Patrick J. Milicic. What's up today, champ?
Hey, we all need the positive, and that's why we're doing this podcast. All the other stuff we've done with our other podcast, basically created this podcast, Everything Combat, because we needed, that positive vibe in our lives and talking to positive people that are driven in life, people that are overcoming everyday life obstacles and doing what they do and doing what they love. And I love this podcast, as do you.
Yes.
And I'm really happy to have, a guest. I think the second person local besides Jens Pulver that we've ever had on one of our podcasts, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you go back into the archives, ladies and gentlemen. Like Pat said, we had former champion, former member of a Milicic Fighting System, Jens Pulver on, former heavyweight champion, gold medalist George Foreman, Dan Gable, amateur wrestling legend. I mean, the list goes on and on. Again, it's not necessarily Everything Combat being a physical fight. It's kind of that metaphorical fight, because everybody has something they're going through, obstacles they're trying to overcome to be the best them. And just having a little bit of off-air conversation with our guest today, Mike Goodwin. He is the proprietor of Caged Aggression MMA. The guy's got passion. He's a hustler, and he definitely loves what he does. And we're so stoked to team up with him for an event coming up soon that we're going to talk about. Mike Goodwin, how you doing today, sir?
I'm great, man. Thank you guys for having me.
No problem, man. No problem. So, we kind of let the cat out of the bag yesterday. November 2nd, live from the River Center.
That was a horrible meow, dude.
That was what?
That was a horrible cat impression.
Well,
Jeez.
It was like a strangled alley cat. He's got a rear naked choke on him in the alley. That's why he sounded like that. But November 2nd, ladies and gentlemen, downtown Davenport at the River Center, the beautiful River Center, man. I love that venue right along the mighty Mississippi River. Caged Aggression, battle tested, is what's going to be going down. And you guys can obviously come check us out if you're in Iowa, but we're adding another element. Our production company, as we said, we've teamed up with Caged Aggression to stream that bad boy live on pay-per-view. Pat and I are going to be covering the weigh-ins. We're also going to be calling the action that night, so we're really stoked to have Mike here to talk about it. But, man, going back, I mean, obviously you and Pat know each other much better than myself. How do your beginnings in MMA, you're being a fan and then moving into promotion. That's not everybody does that. Where'd that start for you?
It's kind of a crazy story, man, because what I learned quickly in this business and in the sport is that there's some affiliation before getting into it. And whether that was, as a fighter or as a coach or a manager, or there was some affiliation with the sport before they got into the business side. Where me, I was actually, I was working for Sprint at the time, and a buddy of mine, Joe Perez, he sold cars. I think he still does sell cars. And he gets a call from the IFL, the International Fight League, and they're looking for some vans. And, they need some vans to transport the fighters and staff around. And Joe picks up that call, and he facilitates everything, and they built a good relationship right out of the gate. So they wanted to hire Joe and his guys for all the events through the IFL. And so Joe calls me up, and he says, "Hey, man, would you be interested in going to, Connecticut, to Mohegan Sun and for these fights and being transportation guy?" And I was like, "Sure." And so I did it. And I mean, first of all, if I would have known the experience that I've gotten out of it, I would have done it for free. I mean, they probably don't want to hear that now, but the idea that I was getting paid to, sit ringside and to be around, to me, kind of the celebrities, I got more excited to see guys like Pat and to see guys like Randy Couture and than I would if I seen, a Hollywood celeb. Yeah. I was introduced to this in the bigness, in the wow and the awe and the presentation and the production value and the fights and all this stuff. So I was still working for Sprint, and I was able to work with the IFL periodically with their events. And it was a sad day when they went out of business, man, because I still wanted to stay involved in the sport somehow. So I started going around to what I'll call all the local shows. And with all due respect, because even the bottom of the barrel shows are still really tough to pull off, when you're doing everything front to back. So I started going to some of them, but they were so basic and so kind of It sounds disrespectful, but they were just kind of thrown together to a point where, good example, and I'd see a guy come out and he's all geared out and fight shorts and, 2 cornermen that look like legit coaches. And across the cage is a guy in basketball shorts and his girlfriend's cornering him. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. And so I start going around to these shows and I started realizing this is kind of the norm. You'd get maybe 1 or 2 good fights out of them. And I said, well, why not try to emulate the big shows like what they do on TV, but at a local level, and get more behind the scenes and get the fans more involved into more than just that one fighter they came to see. Maybe go to the gyms, film their behind the scenes, really get into it. And man, 9 years later, this thing has snowballed and I cannot get away from it. I'm hooked. I want more every show. There's no feeling in the world. I literally start from scratch every show, try to reinvent the wheel, come up with a new theme, a new name. Just because I feel like it can't just be fights every show. You've got to create a promotional phase and all that stuff. So here I go, and 9 years later, and I sit down to build the next show. And when you see all of that come together on fight night, 2-3 months of work, the culmination of it all, and I sit down and the show starts, and I think, man, we built that from nothing. There's not a feeling, I can't describe it, and I think that's what keeps me going, man, is that there is no vested interest except for to put on a great show, obviously make some money to keep the thing going, and keep helping these guys move up to bigger stages. The first time I got a call from the UFC that said, hey, we're doing a Champions Ultimate Fighter series, and we're curious if you'd like to have your flyweight champion on the show and promote Caged Aggression. And I'm like, is this a prank call? Like, what the hell is it? And after that, man, it really kind of solidified to me that we could actually do something here. This is more than just a job and just a show or just the fights. Like, we could actually provide an outlet or a stage for these guys to move up. And now Austin Hubbard, our former champ, is in there, and and Shelton made it, and obviously Wisely was our champ for a while, and just seeing that makes me feel like we're doing something right, we're doing something good. So to have the addition of you guys is it's bananas to me. It's like perfect timing.
Well, and it all happens for a reason, man, and it's cool, man, that to hear you kind of speak to, not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel so much, because that you pay attention to the Bellators or the UFC, because you guys got very good production quality. I was very impressed with it. So it's like, when success leaves clues, you can kind of just follow that formula instead of overcomplicating. And like you said, just take it to a more local level. Because honestly, I'm a huge professional wrestling fan. And, there's a huge difference from like your 1950s or 60s Johnny Valentine just walking out with a robe around his neck to what we're seeing now with ring entrances and Raw. That adds to the whole experience. You're selling the sizzle along with the steak. And I think that's very, very important. And it's cool that you bring that to the table.
I appreciate that, man. I've always just tried to build the shows from a fan perspective. If I bought a ticket, what I would want to see as a fan, and I'm not naive to the fact that the majority of the fans that come to our shows are there for a particular fighter. And let's say they're not even an MMA fan, they're just there to support their nephew or their son or something. Well, they've got 12, 13 other fights they've got to sit through outside of that person's fight they came to see. So if I can put a little snippet up on the screen and give a little background behind each fight, or put some graphics or give them a show, maybe overall we can gain more MMA fans as opposed to just Tony's fans. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And then on top of that, like, even me, I'm a fanatic of the sport, but we are very saturated right now with fights, and we can watch fights 24 hours a day. So it's important that we create an entertainment and a show. And at the end of the day, I can night and day work on matching these fighters up correctly. But at the end of the day, once they get in the cage, it's out of my control. So if we do have a bad night and the fights really aren't electric and it doesn't play out like I think they will, on paper, hopefully we at least gave them a show to back it up. So they're not leaving, all the way like deflated. But if we can provide a good show and a good presentation and we have great fights, it's magic. Yeah.
Well, and a part of that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just, like you said, and I always find it, with the big boys, it's not there was so much to mixed martial arts and meeting mixed martial artists and martial artists in general. People just think like, oh, they're just, cockfighting or whatever. But things like a UFC embedded, like a week before the fight, 5 or 6 or 7 minute little vignettes that really get into humanizing the fighter. I know you guys on your card, and I hope it's okay if I say this. I mean, one of your fighters recently, within the last couple of days, has lost his mother. And that's just, a huge element as far as motivation of him stepping in the cage. But I think that's very important. In addition to just being a stack of badass cats, you humanize them with just interesting stories, because at the end of the day, they're almost mirror ours. Everyone has their stuff going on, right?
For sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. As far as the ups and downs of life, something that somebody told me, quite a few years ago, that professionals, no matter what, will perform whatever job you have, no matter what's going on in your life. When you're a true professional, you have to perform to the best of your abilities, no matter what's going on in your life. And this young man who just lost his mother, man, for anybody that's lost their mother, I lost my mother a few years back, and moms are everything. And so, I can't imagine, how he's feeling, stepping into the cage and going through with this. Certainly a very tough time, but this is something that, fighting, any combat sport mirrors life in general, the ups and downs of life, the hardships. And I think that it speaks that international language of people who, when they see a fight and know a person's, personal story of hardship, can connect with those athletes and certainly empathize with them, because many of us have experienced the same things.
Yeah, definitely. I actually reached out to that fighter as well right away, and I wanted it. I've been fortunate to build a reputation of commitment around what we do, and I've always thought that nobody should work harder than the boss. That's why I get in there and try to do everything I can to show these guys that I'm working equally as hard outside of the cage, because I know what they're doing behind the scenes. I know they have their life, and then they got to train, and all these things that go into committing to me. If I book you 3 months out, a lot of shit's going to come up in 3 months that you've got to just, you've got to push past, and you've got to stay committed. I teach my kids that commitment is crucial. And in doing that, these guys have treated me with so much respect that I rarely have issues unless it's a legitimate back out. So I contacted him like, look, man, just so you know, you can handle this a couple different ways. And if not being in this fight helps you, then I'm completely okay with that. If you need to go handle this and grieve and do all of that, then the last thing you should be worried about is a fight. However, some people need that fight as an outlet to grieve, and that's the route he took. He said,
absolutely,
his mother would want him in the cage. He's doing it for her. So, it's humbling, man. It's super sad, but I want to give that option either way, because
for sure,
I'm fortunate. I still have my mom. My father passed away before I was born. So, I'm just, commitment is crucial to what we do. I think in life, and especially in, when you sign up to do something that people are depending on, you need to follow through. But at the end of the day, life is always going to be more important than a fight. So,
all of us fight fans probably, boxing. We all know, we've heard the story of James Buster Douglas over in Tokyo. His mom had just died days before he shocked the world and knocked out Mike Tyson. So, absolutely, like Pat said, it's the sign of a true professional. But I mean, my goodness, that can't be easy. But it has to be some pretty hardcore motivation.
Yeah, for sure.
It is. So, Mike, through all of these shows that you've done, we're on Caged Aggression 26, I believe, correct?
Well, we've always done a number behind him. It'll be our technically Caged Aggression 26, but it will actually be our 41st night of fights, because we've had 9 2-night events. True. We did a completely free event. We did a 2-nighter out in Sturgis, and then we did 5 or 6 challenger shows, like a smaller show to build up to the big show. So we haven't numbered them all technically within those, but this will be number 41 as far as nights of fights. Okay,
so through all these events that you've done, what are some of the most crazy things that have happened? Funny things. I always love hearing stories. Like Monty Cox, when he wasn't selling any tickets in Michigan for a show many, many, many years ago, he paid people to basically they drew up big signs to walk around with in front of City Hall, boycotting the fight, saying it was, human cockfighting and all that sort of stuff, and then called all the news stations and had them come down and film these people, and then he ended up selling a ton of tickets because of it. That's some of the crazy stuff that Monty would pull off to sell tickets. But for you, what are some of the crazier things, funny things that have happened?
Craziest would have to be Sturgis. We did the 75th anniversary of Sturgis out in South Dakota. Of course, I had to do a 2-night event for whatever reason. I think it's hard enough to do a 1-night event, but for some, I like punishment, I guess, because I kind of become known for 2-night events. So we go out to Sturgis, and I'm like, yep, it's got to be a 2-nighter during the 75th anniversary. They're anticipating 1 million people. So I go out there 3 different times before the actual event, pre-planning. Actually met with the mayor, who is also their head car dealer in town. If that's not awesome. Their number 1 car salesman in town is also the mayor of Sturgis. So, but no, awesome. They embraced us. I mean, the promotional phase was great, but when it all came together and we were there, it was, I don't want to say it was a nightmare. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and I have 3 kids. If that says anything, because it felt like 5 million people. Instead of 1 million. There's just nowhere for anybody to go once the weather hits, which it happened one of the nights. So that night was crazy. But I think just the overall madness of Sturgis. I mean, we built a replica miniature version of our cage that fits on the back of our pickup truck, and we ran that thing up and down the streets of Sturgis for 2 days. Had ring girls in it. It just the whole trip was crazy, man. I mean, awesome. It was just awesome.
The carnies arrived at Sturgis.
Yeah, exactly. We were directly across the street from a Full Throttle Saloon, the one that was on TV, and I mean, I could literally have a podcast separately from this just to talk about Sturgis, because there was just so much crazy shit. But it was great though. I mean, financially, maybe not so much, but I mean, to be able to we took 77 people out there, fighters, coaches, team, to be able to take them all up to Mount Rushmore and have that picture on my wall in my office that's cool stuff, man. Those are memories that, that everybody that went there, they're never going to forget. Mike and Kim Goodwin, Caged Aggression, took us out to Sturgis, got to experience that, got to fight there. That's still got to be my overall crazy wow moment. And then in the early years, how that was, the non-sanctioned days. It was just learning and growing. And then you'd have some stuff in the crowd sometimes, or you'd have some fighters in the cage do some crazy things. But if I had to pick one, I would say Sturgis for sure.
Fighters doing crazy things? What?
Yeah, right.
Well, fighters are fighters for a reason,
right?
I used to call my gym what was it, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, when he ended up on the island of misfit toys. That's kind of what I used to call my gym, the island of the misfit toys. It dawned on me while I'm trying to coach a bunch of fighters, and Jens Pulver's screaming at me, "Why are we doing this? This is bullshit." A lot of good times, man. A lot of good times.
I guess in the cage, one thing I never want to see, probably the craziest thing, is 2 amateur guys were fighting, and one throws a kick, and the other guy goes to check the kick, and I see it. Well, first you hear it, and then I see when he checked the kick, his shin snapped.
No way.
Based on his momentum and the way he was leaning as he comes to step down on that foot, it just folded up like a chair. And that was the worst. That's, it's a catch-22, because you want to see these epic battles and these brawls, but when you're paying that insurance bill, you want everybody to be safe financially, but more importantly, the kid, he's got to work on Monday. You know what I mean? These are amateurs. So those are the things, as safe as I believe our show is, and the commission makes it for us. Those are those variables that you can't control, and I never want to see that.
It's interesting you say that, because, and I've never heard that, and I wonder how many of these kind of more independent promotions have that happen, but you've seen that happen more frequently. Obviously, years ago with Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman. I think there was another guy in Bellator it happened to. I mean, I don't know.
Jose Pelelandi did it also.
Yeah, interesting.
It does happen in Muay Thai, kickboxing and MMA. So it's never. I've seen it one time as a broadcaster, and not a pleasant sight at all. So
Let me ask you guys this, because this is my strangest. Obviously, it's not about me, but that was an amateur gals fight here in St. Louis. It was a mixed boxing and MMA card, and the bell rang, and the two girls come out and start swinging, and one girl begins to urinate on herself.
Oh,
yeah.
Nah, that's a first.
And they kept going.
Wait a minute. Say that again?
Yes, dude. They begin fighting. The girls start fighting. This chick, the one gal, is in a black kind of sports bra and tight black shorts. And she literally, I think she like throws a kick or whatever, and like she begins to just spray urine. She starts pissing on herself. And everyone kind of like, whoa. And the referee kind of stands back like, what the fuck? But never stops the fight. Never stops it. They keep going. And honestly, she was pissing on herself for a good maybe 20, 30 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
I was just checking if I heard you correctly. My God.
Oh, man. It goes down in lore. And I was a photographer, so I have pictures of it. This is, she was in full-on squirt mode. So, Mike, I want to ask you, brother. I mean, obviously, as a fan, obviously I'm a huge professional wrestling fan. There's a wrestling renaissance going on right now, all these different professional wrestling promotions coming out. And even now, there's not just one show in town. You got your UFC, obviously your UFC, your Bellator, your Ryzen. One Fighting Championship has a TV deal on TNT. What are your thoughts on kind of the state of the business, if you will? And where do you see yourself promotion-wise? What's the end game for you in the promotion?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I've been asked that actually many times. What's your end goal, or I guess now I have a why. I definitely have a why. I want to continue to help guys move to bigger stages. I think that does nothing but help the credibility of our show and brings in new talent that sees that maybe we have an outlet to help them get to bigger shows. Because you named the giants, but at my level, what I know is all the regional and all the local promotions, good and bad. And so I guess to me, all those giants that you named, to be able to see guys that maybe started with us or that maybe started somewhere, moved up to us, and then to one of those giants, that's incredible, man. So I would take any of that. That's the end goal for me. I never want to try. I never got into this to compete or try to get up to that level or anything like that. As a matter of fact, when I first got into it, I was so damn intimidated by guys like Pat that I didn't know if I'd ever even talk to him. So the idea that guys would be making it from our show to bigger stages never crossed my mind until I always tell the story until Zach Mickelwright fought for me for the first time. It was a turning point for me as a fan where I went, man, watching him in the cage, I was like, this is just a different level. And maybe we can do something with this. But long story short, I think right now the end goal is like I just said, to help get more guys up to bigger stages, ultimately the UFC, quality events, keep building our fan bases. But in terms of where do I say we made it or I reached my goal, I don't think I have one, because I never expected to be here now. Not that I never strive for greatness or that I don't push every show to make it better than the last or learn from my mistakes, but I never got into this with an end goal of that's where I made it. And maybe that's why we're still doing it, is because I'm still trying to learn and grow with every show, and maybe I never will. Maybe
and it's cool you get that kind of gratification by seeing, and I know, Pat, you've been through it too, seeing these grassroots guys, grow into larger platforms. Because, a special breed of individual becomes an elite fighter. You know what I mean? Not to sound corny, but, many stand and gaze at Mount Olympus. Very few even have the ability to climb, and even less have the ability to stand atop Mount Olympus. So to be able to see that cultivation of talent grow to that next level has to be pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is, because then I get to look back, and fortunately I've been big on photo albums and video from the start. Even back when it was as basic as it gets. To me, I've always thought, someday we're going to sit down with our grandkids and the fighters are too, and you'd be able to show them these things.
Yeah.
There's still shows out there where you go fight and there's no video and there's no photos and there's barely any speakers, and guys get in a cage and fight another grown man for our entertainment, and they can't even show anybody a picture of it. I think that we're way past that. I think we should be. I think the fighters should have more, self-worth to not be taken advantage of like that. That's just kind of my personal opinion.
Yeah.
These are old school days. I mean, Amsterdam days are over. These guys deserve more, and to be able to not, you know what I'm saying? Like,
let our larger audience know, because this episode will go pretty wide. What was Amsterdam?
Well, Amsterdam was like the strip club days, the non-sanctioned. You guys can sign up in the crowd to fight. And
the guys in basketball shorts with his girl cornering him.
I mean, that was great entertainment. I just think that now I think MMA has evolved so much and it's become more mainstream, and we're trying to still grab that demographic that thinks it's bad, and we're trying to still grow MMA as like NFL. Like, you may not like football, but it's accepted, at least. It's accepted internationally, and I want that same thing for MMA. So those old school days of those scary shows, I don't think that does anything for the fighters of the sport.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's important that it's more than just a fight for me, and I'm not even the one fighting. So yeah, I think we're at a level now where we all should continue to try to keep doing better with our events. The fighters should do better than the last. We should always be trying to improve with everything we're doing.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just stagnant and you're just greedy.
Yeah, no, and the Amsterdam days, obviously I remember well, because I remember, even driving somewhere, assembling the cage, fighting in the cage, tearing the cage down, and then drive home from, somewhere in the Midwest, wherever it was, and the tiny shows in different places. The few people have ever heard of the Sioux City Slaughter. Where a Sioux City promoter talked to my former manager and said, "Hey, man," and this is back when the UFC would allow fighters to fight outside of the organization, because they didn't have that many shows, and you didn't make that much money anyway fighting for the UFC, even as a world champion. I wasn't breaking the, I wasn't becoming a millionaire. So
Google said you got $6 million, man.
Yeah. So I did not go to this particular show, but I saw the film and it was horrifying. So the promoter, there was Mark Hughes, Nate Schroeder, Jens Pulver, several other guys, Jeremy Horn, who went up to Sioux City, Iowa. And the promoter walked into the locker room and talked to all my fighters and said, "Hey, listen, these guys aren't that good. Please carry these guys for a while, and don't hurt them too bad, because I want to actually be able to do another show with these same kids. I'm trying to build these guys up." And so all the guys in the locker room were like, "Yeah, no problem. We'll take care of you. Don't worry about it." Well, once they got in the cage, the instinct kicked in, and all these guys just 30-second fights and guys going to the hospital, and the guy walked into the locker room after the show and goes, "I can't even show my face in town anymore after what you just did to all these guys." So I remember the days of just doing it out of passion and love, and that's what it was all about. And that's what I like about you, Mike, is you have passion for it.
Yeah.
And good things come to people who are passionate, and that's why we have all teamed up to do this broadcast, this worldwide.com broadcast of your show, and why I'm committed to getting back into coaching and developing athletes, so that they are world-class fighters, bringing them up through your organization and going from there, and I'm really excited about this, to be doing it. I'm excited that my co-host from my podcast gets a chance to rightfully do something with his talents in terms of being a play-by-play guy, because he's so well versed in the knowledge of MMA, pro wrestling, and that world. So we're gonna absolutely have a blast. And I think with Justin Holstein and Paul Martinez and all of our talents coming together, I think this will be as good of a broadcast as anyone could ever do. And I think people are going to be very impressed with it.
I agree, Mike.
Oh man, I like I said, I've unfortunately, if there's one thing the business side out, one of my favorite quotes is I love the sport, but I hate the business. because the business side is kind of grimy, especially when I first got into it. And it's kind of made me a little bit of an untrusting person. And I was never like that, but just to protect your baby.
We call that cynical.
You're building.
We call that cynical.
Yeah. So I'm like, I become untrusting and like, but what, what's the real reasons? And man, when you guys got a hold of me, I feel, I think the term blessed is a little overplayed, but I really do, because it's a perfect marriage. All those guys you just named, I feel like I've put together a great team that have been there and committed to what we've been trying to build for years now. You guys obviously are a stellar team. I do. I think it's a perfect marriage. I think the timing is perfect. I'm really big on timing.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I'm thankful too, because I know what you guys bring to the table for something that, we've been trying to build for a long time. And man, I am blessed. I am appreciative,
and I'm super stoked that it's in the Quad Cities too, with us all being from the Quad Cities, and obviously Pat going on to take over the world in MMA. I mean, they're the military fighting system was basically the New York Yankees of the UFC for a very long time. So for Pat to kind of bring it back full circle for me is like really, really big motivator, because MMA I'm a big fan of, and obviously what you're doing, and like I said, timing is everything. Like, we've all been doing our own thing, but these energies have coalesced to this. I think it's like I was telling Pat, it's like the Super Friends, man. Everybody has their strength, but together, you know what I mean, they're so strong.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you run into situations where you've got a core group of strengths, but then you get some people that maybe don't have the strengths. They just find something that they can use out of that, or that they can take from it. And that's where relationships or partnerships don't work out, because it becomes greedy, and it becomes guys not in it for the right reason, or people not in it for the right reason. But we all have a vested interest here in doing the right thing and building it up and doing it for MMA in the area. And I mean, believe me, I try to play devil's advocate on everything like this, because it's kind of what keeps me in line. But you're justified,
unfortunately, to be cynical. Like, human beings have, like you said, it's so weird. I call it like the VH1 behind the music stories. Like, before they were great, there was all these different machinations, whether it's bands or fighters or, professional athletes. It's just, you have a passion for something, but when you get to a certain level, like you said, business and money gets involved, and then people start going after that pie, and then it becomes less fun because of the business. But, we all have to kind of maintain that joy for what brought us there in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. It has me very excited, and I think just like anything else, when you do it for a long time, naturally as humans, you get a little bit not complacent, but maybe you start to die out a little bit, or maybe the flame isn't burning as bright. And that happens to me every few years, and then a guy makes it to the UFC, or Pat Miletich calls me, see? And then all of a sudden it's on fire again.
That tends to put a little sunshine in one's day.
Well, and all this, I think we should explain how we ended up here circumstantially. I mean, you were telling us a little bit about, your, previous occupations, and how those companies, smaller companies, were bought out, and you kept losing jobs, and ended up, starting to promote. And, to be honest with you, the same thing has happened to me 3 different times with 3 different broadcasting jobs that I've had. I was working for, at one time, Showtime Sports, ESPN, and Access TV, all at the same time. And there was a pecking order on my contracts on which one came first and who I had to work for. But I was the only guy in the world working for 3 networks at the same time as I was a freelancer. And slowly those things started to go away. The IFL being not run well by the suits. I still love those guys, but they really didn't listen a whole lot to the people with the experience. The IFL went away. Strikeforce was bought out by the UFC. My Showtime Sports job went away. Anthem Sports just bought Access TV, and the entire mixed martial arts production department went away. Anthem Sports just ended it, in one fell swoop. And suddenly, there's a lot of great people out of work. And, I sat there and I thought about it, and I said, you know what, I don't ever want to have to depend on a suit again. And so being surrounded by talented people like both of you, like Justin Holstein, like Paul Martinez, and many other people, not many other people, but several other people in my life, I said, you know what, why can't we do this ourselves? Why can't we just do it ourselves. I'm certainly capable of coaching and creating world champions. I'm capable of training law enforcement, military, all the way from Barney Fife up to the tip of the spear guys. And you guys are both, in my mind, as good as it gets in your fields, but we haven't necessarily been given, great breaks to be able to really explode. And so by joining forces, that's what this is all about. The circumstances of life pushed me back into where I know I can dominate and bring you guys into my life even more, where we can all do it together and kick people's asses. And that's what I'm about. And when I'm passionate, I've never been the best at anything that I wasn't passionate about. But when I'm passionate about something, I will literally kick everyone's ass at it. And we're about to do that again.
Well, that's why I always say, man, I don't believe in luck necessarily. It's when preparation meets opportunity. And this goes back to what Mike said about timing of everything. If you're not prepared when that opportunity comes, you're just asked out, man. So, I mean, preparation has to be key, man. Even if things aren't necessarily going your way at any given time, you got to be prepared.
And we put in the time. I mean, that's a big thing, too. We're not afraid to get our hands dirty. We're not afraid of hard work. We've been putting in years and years and years now of what we would call our craft. I mean, I tell fighters that almost daily. Like, it's a timing thing. If the timing's not right, don't force it, because this isn't going to end well. But if the timing's right, then I think together we can make magic, and we usually do. We fully commit to something, and the timing's there. So I'm ready, man. I'm excited.
The timing, assembling the right team, and this is something that Pat has helped me learn as well, but just general life experiences, man. Patience for the journey. There is no such thing as like overnight successes, or however you want to phrase. Like you said, you got to put that time and pay your dues, and like you said, perfect that craft to really, again, like you said, you're trying to create an upper echelon level of promotion just locally, but you've paid attention to those clues that the success brought from the UFC and these other entities. So I'm beyond excited, man. When Pat hit me up with this, I'm just like, the blessings just keep on coming. The day Pat hit me up and was like, hey, do you want to do this podcast with me? Which grew into, like Pat said, everything combat. I mean, I've been pinching myself. When Pat and I were in studio in the Quad Cities and we're literally talking to George Foreman on the phone. I'm looking at Pat and I'm just like pinching I'm like, dude, this is happening right now.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But yeah, I mean,
and that's the way I was too. That when like I said, when I would see guys like Pat and Randy, and I would like, wow, man, I'm here. Like I'm part of this.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, it's cool.
When it's something, man, as I've gotten older, I'm sorry, Pat, but being able, and a friend told me about it, because, man, even with my old podcast, it's me speaking to you. I was talking to wrestling legends, MMA legends, etc., and I was just going and going and going, even up until our other podcasts and everything combat. He was like, dude, you got to be able to stop and take the time to collect and understand these blessings that you're a part of, man, the people you've been able to talk to, because whatever it is, whether you're a professional athlete or whatever, like when you start thinking about how it is, like it's already almost over. I don't know if that makes sense, but you don't want it to be over to appreciate it, I guess is my point, man. Being in these moments to appreciate these blessings is absolutely paramount, in my humble opinion.
Well, I'm going to do my best not to freak out when it all comes together. I usually don't settle down until the first fight starts, but no, I'm obviously nervous, but at the same time, my excitement and knowing what this does for everybody definitely trumps the nervousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just excited. I'm excited for all of us to do this, and it's something that I was thinking about also this morning while sitting on my lawnmower, and we talked about this before we started taping this. I've been in meetings with Kevin Riley, who was the president of NBC, selling a TV show to him. Chris Albrecht, who ran HBO and the Stars Network. I'm as nervous to do this show as I was to sit down in front of Kevin Riley, the president of NBC at the time, because I know it's big. I know it's important to all of us, and that we can do a great job. And we do great work. Again, not patting ourselves on the back, but we've been doing this for a long time, man. We've been at this for a long time. We're capable of doing as good a show as anyone on the planet, and that's what I expect, and that's what both of you expect, and everyone else involved. And so, this is I'm pumped. I'm absolutely pumped.
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is talk about this particular card, talk about some of the fighters on there, and let people know kind of what they're going to be seeing.
Yeah, I mean, this is our fall show. So like I said earlier, we've been kind of become known for doing these 2-night events where I get to structure separating out the amateurs and the pros. The only problem with that is that, fans are buying 2 tickets. So they want to see fights on both nights. They have to buy 2 tickets. The fall show doesn't really work for a 2-night event. So we pack a lot more stuff into one night. So in terms of a fan perspective, you're actually getting a little bit more for your money because you're getting a full pro card and a big amateur undercard as well. So we've got 15 fights lined up, 7 pro fights. We've got a couple different pro debuts. But the one thing I like to point out about our shows, and I said this earlier too, I'm kind of a madman when it comes to the matchups. There is truly a story behind every matchup. I think that's important to help promote it. But the quality of the matchup, I don't have the best fighters in the world on our show. What I have is great, committed, young talent that I match up the best
Equally.
I can.
Yeah,
equally.
you match them very equally. It's entertaining.
Yeah, and committed young talent, and they get out there and they put on a show. And when I match them up correctly, the athletic commission said one time in a fighter meeting, they don't know what it is, but they feel like, for whatever reason, these fighters step up a little bit when they fight on our show, because they've seen them fight in other local shows and the other promotions around Iowa and Illinois and stuff. So it's not like they've only seen them fight in Caged Aggression, but they've said, they step it up. Whatever it is, with the presentation or whatever we do makes them just step it up to another level.
For sure.
And I believe that, and I see it. So when we say amateur card and pro card, it gets a little jaded because the general fan hears that and they say, oh, I want to go the pro card. But I'm telling you, these amateur matchups rival the pros in a big way, especially the newer pros.
Yeah.
So we do have 3 amateur title fights that help beef up the amateur card. We've got a stellar amateur female fight. That seems to be one of the crowd favorites every time, is the female fight. So we have a local fighter named Claire Schneckloth that you were speaking of earlier about going and filming, and they she's kind of a new up and comer. Still very green to the sport, but she's very committed. She's in there working hard, trying to learn, trying to get a better grasp on things. So I've got a girl very similar to her, comes from a great gym, Jackson Wink out in New Mexico, but she's also new. She's only been training since January. Claire's been training since December. She's 1-0. Claire's 1-1. I believe it's a good matchup. The females and the newer amateurs get a little tricky because I don't have a lot of stuff to go off of yet. But I think based on who they train with, the amount of time they've been training, I believe that's going to be an exciting fight for the fans. On this particular card, in the Caged Aggression circle, I should say, there's been a fight that's kind of been brewing for years and years. There's a local guy named Josh Neal. And I know you know him, Pat. I think you even trained with him for a while.
Yeah.
And he's one of those guys that, when we talk about timing, when the timing's right and he's able to, to give his all to a fight and he puts the time in and no excuses, he has the potential to make it someday. And I've got him fighting a guy that he's, to us, the definition of toughness and heart. He is a 3-1 pro now. He actually just took his first pro loss in Burlington a few months back to an undefeated 5-0 pro. This guy, Michael Shipp, has never been finished in a fight. He's one we took out to Sturgis. He got his arm broken in the first round. And this is as an amateur. He got his arm broken in the first round. He completed the fight, fought all 3 rounds. 2 of those with a broken arm. He's the definition of not giving up. And, this is one of those fights that there's been some bad blood over the years and they've been watching each other and they knew they would finally meet up someday. And Michael Shipp fought one of Josh's teammates back in March and beat him up pretty good. And so that now there's this personal stuff with his teammate and his friend. And it's just a great story. We just put a trailer out yesterday for it. And you could tell these guys can't wait to get a hold of each other. But that's our main event. And like I said earlier, it's not two of the biggest names in the country. The fall show doesn't really support that particular type of fight. But in terms of a Midwest or a Caged Aggression circle or two up-and-coming pros, it's a stellar matchup.
Yeah, and you can see that trailer, that little promotional video of Chip and Neil on the Caged Aggression MMA Facebook page as well. So if you want to go peep that out.
Yeah, they seem to not like each other a whole lot.
Yeah.
yeah. There's been some bad blood, and
which makes for such a good rivalry and such a good fight. Yeah.
It really does, and then we've got some veterans that we'll call it in the Caged Aggression circle. I've got there's some brothers, Clint and Jeremy Anderson, been friends of mine for a long time. I've told them to retire for like 4 years now, but they won't, because they both got great jobs, great families, and their life right now isn't like a pro fighter with maybe like Clint's record. Clint's got 9 professional wins under his belt. When I go to match that up, fighters and managers are like, well, wait a minute, man, and it's Clint is the epitome of one of those guys that it's just instilled in him, and he just doesn't want to walk away from it. Great job, family's doing good. Yeah, and there's no reason for them to fight right now except for passion. They just can't. So, again, it still goes back to me matching it up correctly. I'm not going to bring in a current up-and-coming, right on the cusp of making it 9-win pro to fight Clint, because that doesn't make sense right now. And that's the beauty of me being behind the scenes and matching it, is that I really do study every fighter, where they're at, timing, current skill sets, all that jazz. So Clint's like, I got 1 or 2 left, man. What do you think? And so we went way back. It's so funny. We're talking about the beginning days, because Clint fought a guy named the Ghetto Gorilla 10 years ago. And I was actually driving back with the cage. I drove to Kansas to pick up the cage that day. I'm driving back, so I wasn't able to make it to the show. And I had heard from Clint's brother, Jeremy. I called him, how'd the fight go? He's like, man, Clint was winning the first round, then back and forth standing up. Then it went to the ground. Clint got him in a triangle. And then McKenzie's his name, picks Clint up, while he's in the triangle, and slams him, knocks him out. Remind me of the old Matt Hughes fight.
Right.
And he slams him, knocks Clint out, and then, of course, the fight's over. And I guess that's been one of those fights over the course of a decade now that Clint, it's haunted him. I had that fight. It was one of his first amateur losses. And so fast forward, I get to put that on as one of Clint's last fights, the 10-year rematch, the Ghetto Gorilla. So see, that's what I mean. Sometimes you see it on paper and you're like, but there really is a story behind it. And
awesome.
Meeting with Jackson a couple times at the gym and filming him, I'm pretty confident that he could still pick Clint up and slam him, knock him out. So, it's one of those fights where I go, I don't know, whoever's night it is. And so that one kind of excites me, because there's a lot of history behind it. I know Clint for a long time, and it's a fight that matters to him. And then Jackson, he's been asking me for years to get on the show, but when I know who's in the gym and who's not, and when guys aren't in the gym and they just want a cool poster, I try not to do that. I need to see that you're in there training and actually caring and committing. And so he did that. He started showing back up at the gym.
Those guys are going to be throwing down in the welterweight division there, Anderson and Jackson.
Yeah, yep, that's right. And I believe they fought at lightweight, back then. But yeah, they're fighting in the welterweight division. I've also got a young kid named Dominic Martin. He is a 26-time amateur fighter. He was one of those amateurs that embraced it, that said, I'm going to go out and go to every show and fight every type of opponent, so I can learn as an amateur like I'm supposed to. So then when I go pro, there's no, I didn't just go 7-0 as an amateur by fighting guys maybe I shouldn't have, and now I think I'm ready for pro. The kid's been fighting for like 7 years, 26 amateur fights. He moved to Nashville just specifically to train with Nashville MMA. He's been there for about 1.5 years now. He's from this area. His skill set has grown tremendously since his move out there. And so he is finally ready to make his pro debut, which is a big deal for him and for the area. And
going up against Seth Iguchi at the featherweight division.
I said to Dominic, I said, man, there are probably 10 shows that I know of that you can go get an easy pro debut win. Why Caged Aggression? I asked him that on the interview. And that's not the type of fight he wants. He wants a fair, legitimate pro debut fight that's an actual test. So that's right up my alley. I gave him a guy named Sam Agushi who has 40 amateur fights, a decade-long worth of amateur fights, very much like Dominic. Been doing this a long time as amateurs, have a gang of amateur fights, and he just actually had his pro debut in August and won. So these guys are really, they kind of mirror each other. Their styles mirror each other. Their careers mirror each other. The only difference is one is older and one is much younger. But that's another one I'm really looking forward to, because these aren't just two guys that had a few amateur fights saying, I think it's time. These are legitimate amateurs that if I didn't tell the fans the difference, they probably wouldn't know. So I'm really excited to see how Dominic's career starts, where Sam goes after his first win. That's a good one. And I've got the heavyweights. I got a heavyweight pro fight, and I've got a heavyweight amateur fight, because the crowd seems to love two things: female and heavyweights. So I always try to make sure I put those on every show. But yeah, I mean, I could go on. I could break down every fight, and there's 15 fights.
Well, that's the fun thing about both heavyweights and female fighters. Well, female fighters, first of all, just never seem to run out of gas.
Right.
They will, no matter how fatigued, will go at 100 miles an hour. It's pretty incredible. Every female fight that I've ever called, they literally don't run out of gas. And then, the heavyweights obviously can end so suddenly and so violently that, yeah, they're definitely, a weight division that should be on every card, because you just never know when that's going to end or how it's going to end.
Yep.
Always unpredictable. Well, I'm stoked, man. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I am too. We actually, the fall show, we open the doors a little bit earlier. We typically do a 7:00 start time. We start this one at 6 because there are a couple more fights than normal.
The weigh-ins are also open to the public, right? The weigh-ins?
Yeah. What we do is we bring in everybody mid-afternoon for kind of some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, paperwork and all that jazz. And then at 6:00, we do a live weigh-in presentation, full staging and everything, video, and we'll have the guys come out, weigh in, face off for the fans. Believe we're going to put that out live too on all our social media outlets. But you can definitely come down. It's free to the public and media at 6:00. Usually lasts about 30 minutes.
Very cool. November 2nd, man. I'm looking forward to it, man. November 2nd, live from the River Center. Again, more information and details about how you can acquire this event if you happen to not be in the Quad Cities or want to get it on pay-per-view. That information will be coming soon. Any closing statements, my man? This is awesome. It's great to kind of online meet you. I'm looking forward to actually physically meeting you and blowing this up, man. This is going to be sweet.
Yeah, how can people find you, your website, your social media?
Yeah, for sure. Caged Aggression, pretty much if you Google Caged Aggression, you'll find all the different outlets. Our website, cagedaggressionevents.com, Facebook, Twitter. I probably use Facebook more than any of the other social media outlets, but Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. If you just search Caged Aggression or Mike Goodwin, it usually pops up pretty easily. But Caged Aggression Events, I try to keep that updated. Fight card, trailers as they come out. Of course, we'll put all the pay-per-view information on there once we have it. But yeah, just if you Google Caged Aggression, you'll find us.
Very cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, November 2nd, we are looking forward to it, Downtown Davenport, the River Center. Thank you so very much, Mr. Goodwin, for your time. Mr. Milicic, any closing statements?
Thanks, Mike, taking the time, and we're excited to get this launch going and chomping at the bit over here, buddy.
For sure. I thank you guys very much. Thanks for taking the time. I know time is valuable, especially with families and everything. And I'm equally, if not more, excited to be a part of it for sure.
Beautiful.
Let's go, ladies and gentlemen. All right, peace and so much love. Stay tuned. There will always be more.